See, I want to take a sidestep here to talk about an important issue. First of all, this last week we saw Atlanta's top wide receiver, Calvin Ridley, say he's stepping away from football in the middle of the season to deal with some mental health issues. First, it was gymnast Simone Biles, then tennis number one Naomi Osaka, and now Ridley. These are all top athletes performing at the top of their game. Now, you've dealt with some mental health issues in the past, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on this latest move by Ridley.
Well, I think it's great the fact that the NFL has kind of jumped out in front of this, and over the past year has really made it a priority in the way that every team now has some behavioral clinician fully staffed that is there to deal specifically with some of these mental health issues. And I think it's great for someone like Calvin Ridley and the others you mentioned that during the season, this is an acceptable and even not just acceptable, but sort of ushered in by the NFL. And so I think, as you mentioned, in my life, I've had several issues crop up from time to time, one of which, mental health related, happened to me back in 1994, the first one, when I was playing for the Bears. And this wasn't the climate back then. And so I did the best I could really to hide it and showed up every day, even though I didn't want to get out of bed ever. And just, over time, what I encountered was eventually this is what it took to turn the tide. It took me to reach out to a mental health professional, a therapist, and eventually get on some antidepressants. And the combination of the two was not an overnight fix, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, just the reality of it is it's not. And it takes maybe a month, maybe two, to start to turn the dark cloud perspective into something a little more optimistic. And I just, as you mentioned Calvin Ridley, there's been Dak Prescott and Lane Johnson recently, the tackle with the Eagles. In the season, it's really a breath of fresh air for me to know that the NFL has taken this long range view that, let's get these guys back on track, however long it takes, and then welcome them back when they get back good and healthy and ready to go.
Is part of it, I imagine some of it's just pressure of being a professional athlete and playing at that level, but is part of it the pressure from the fans as well as colleagues and just, the things that you're facing in your daily life?
Well, I think in my case, I can only speak for me, but at times when anxiety followed by isolation, or maybe the two go hand in hand, and depression, when all that sets in, it's the biggest misperception you could possibly have, because you really aren't alone, and you just think you are. And so I think it takes some support around you, and it takes you reaching out though also, and like Calvin Ridley and others are doing, and said, hey, time out, I need a break here, and here's why I need a break. And then hopefully those resources are available to you and you're actually steered in that direction. And I think that's a good way to go about it, because the misperception is I'm letting everybody down, or I'm letting myself down, or my team, or in the pro athlete's case, this especially the one who's on a team, the city, the fans, everybody. Well, that's not really the case. It just feels like that. And so talking it out and getting out from underneath that cloud, stepping away like Calvin Ridley's doing. And I don't know what his particular mental health issues are, but I think just stepping away, obviously he thinks he needs it, and the team is supporting him in that.
It's interesting because 35 years ago, if we were talking about this type of issue, we were just talking about physical injury, because in the 60s and 70s, a player, if he got hurt or if he came out, got banged up, maybe had a concussion, and the idea was the trainer was sending him back in. Come on, just get back in there. And now we've progressed to the point where we've kind of passed that in some ways. But now we're on to the mental health issues, which, like you said, I agree with you. It's a breath of fresh air to see the NFL taking this to heart and dealing with people, because you may be a top athlete, you may be making millions of dollars that everybody looks up to, and you may have a lot, but you're still just a regular person. You're a person, and that's who you are.
We
You have to deal with all that stuff.
we're all tied into the human condition, aren't we?
You
It's,
got it.
and one last thing I'd like to say about this is that, I'm actually behind the scenes working on hopefully bringing a program to whether it's schools or after school programs, starting earlier with kids, 4th, 5th grade on up through high school, and starting to, the idea I have and this is based on some experiences that I've had over the years of getting kids to be able to certainly identify or start to identify traits, good characteristic traits in themselves and in others, and so that eventually you can start building and learn how to build your own sort of support system or home team, if you call it. And that way, let's just take 4th, 5th grade, 6th graders bullying on school campuses or cyberbullying. That immediately has a way of leading itself to isolation for the person who's being bullied. Whereas if you had a group of people that from time to time you go to just out of habit, and then express yourselves in these kinds of ways, as you grow up and become into your later teens and 20s and 30s and 40s, then this is kind of who you are, is dealing with challenges by way of reaching out to other people. So I think that can lend itself to possibly proactively intervene instead of letting isolation and anxiety and depression take hold. You kind of proactively counteract that.